Okay, thanks, Sally. Good to see everybody today and happy Earth Day. Like I say, we were preparing for the program this week. I really want to do something to recognize Earth Day. You start thinking back, kind of a little bit reflecting on your own life. And as many of you know, I've mentioned, I was born in DC and raised here in Northern Virginia. So being a child of the 70s, I actually remember when Earth Day was a big thing. I even credit that somewhat to a little bit some of the choices I've made as far as my own personal life and career options. And we would drive every Sunday. We drive over the Key Bridge, going down to attend church down DuPont Circle. And as a child, we'd be crossing over the bridge, and of course, we're kids. We're like holding our nose. We're going across. Mom, Dad, I can't take it. But you would drive across the river, and it would stink. Uh, and nobody would even think about swimming or fishing in it back at that time. So you look back and like, wow, we've really made quite a bit of progress. When you think about people can now do recreational fishing in there. It's times, we can go actually even go swimming, in there and stuff. So, wow, it's been a lot of changes in that time. Good things, positive things. But what we faced back in the 70s when Earth Day, we really started becoming aware of it. Things I'm going to say were a little bit simpler, maybe even a little bit easier. Essentially, at that point, there was just the treatment plants. There was sewage flowing out from the treatment plants into the river, and so we were able to go around and identify these sources of pollution and basically rework, improve, upgrade, make changes in the technology. So the emphasis was on smokestacks and, like I said, treatment plants. Again, if you're anywhere in my age group, I'm sure you remember that, give a hoot, don't pollute, and the stopping of litter and stuff. And all that's very important and relevant. And of course, then it's grown. We've made changes with, the Chesapeake Bay, efforts to restore that name. But now you look kind of where we're at now today, and Earth Day's theme for this year. I'm trying to make sure I get it right. But I wrote it down and then I lost it, but I know it's on restoring our Earth. And so I think when you look at some of the challenges we're faced with today, things like a changing climate, non-point source pollution, we look at the loss of habitat. And one of the things that concerns me so much too is our loss of biodiversity, the number of species that go extinct. And so we all take a look, or we need to take a look at what our role is in this. Pretty much all these problems are, self-induced. And so I think we all have a responsibility to be a part of the solution. So where that leads me to is this whole conversation is what can we do? What can we do within our own lives to try to make an improvement, make a difference? And one of the easiest things and one of the most enjoyable things and beneficial things that we can do is so simple, so within our reach, and that's simply a matter of planting native plants. I've been associated with this for a long, long time. I remember I was on the board, and I'm going back like 25 years ago and stuff. And the native plant movement was just a little small kind of clique, almost a little clique. We kind of were preaching to ourselves. But then I think what happened is I credit Doug Talmy, University of Delaware, really connected the dots for us. And what he demonstrated so clearly was how to have a functional ecosystem. We have to have the plants that in turn support the insects that in turn support the wildlife. So to have a functional ecosystem, to have a food chain that actually works, we need to have the native plants. Without it, the system doesn't work. So that's something that we can all contribute to with adding native plants to our garden. And we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the afternoon here. There's so much to talk about, and I want plenty of time to have questions and hear from everybody on your experiences with this and share ideas. So what I tried to do is I just kind of randomly narrowed this down to 3 shrubs, 3 trees, and 3 perennials that I'm going to show pictures of, and we'll take questions in between and hear what you have to say and contribute. So let's begin looking at some of the trees. Now, a little bit of my selection process is trying to find things that also look pretty in our gardens. Uh, for many of years, centuries, we've always tried to design gardens that look pretty, but now we're trying to take a look at them and say, well, not only are they pretty for us, but they also function as an ecosystem. So something like our Virginia fringe tree, it's a member of the ash family. It will be flowering soon. It's kind of a small to intermediate sized tree. So this really lends itself quite well to suburban type of landscapes. A lot of the big trees, I think of like oaks that are such a keystone species, but that, like I'm in a little townhouse, many of you are smaller properties, it may be difficult to manage. But this is a beautiful tree with nice ornamental value. You can see another name for it is the old man's beard. It gets these tassels of flowers that hang down kind of late April, early May time period. Typically, they can be slightly fragrant. And then the tree also has a nice structure. It typically grows as kind of a multi-stem tree, similar as a redbud would, but this is one that you can also prune it, train it into a single stem tree, if that's the direction you want to go with it. So again, it's beautiful flowers, a little bit of a slight fragrance, a light yellow fall coloration, native here in Virginia, and appropriately sized. You're on about mature size. It's probably going to stay under 20 feet for you. I've seen some really old ones in the forest. They're stretched out taller than that. But think of this like almost like you would a dogwood or redbud type of environment. And it grows in that kind of half sun, half shade. So that's a very good possibility. We'll move on and see what I have next in my little show here. Sweet Bay Magnolia. Many of us think of the southern magnolia, which has the glossy evergreen leaves. This is a very close relative. It's in the same genera, so they're both magnolias. But this one, like I said, Magnolia virginiana is our smaller one. It's going to mature at about, again, 20 to 30 feet. The image that you see with the young tree, that's out at Meadowlark Gardens, out in their Asian collection. This was from a few years ago. I haven't been back. I'm sure they put some size on, but yeah, that's with the Korean bell tower in the background. So it's a really distinctive kind of mix of cultures there, where we're putting a Virginia native and with the bell tower there. This tree naturally grows in kind of boggy, moist environments or streamside valleys. And we've talked about this over and over and over, the amount of rain we've had the past few years, our dense, heavy clay soils. It's difficult to get plants that will grow in those conditions. Well, this is a tree that actually thrives in those conditions. So it's got a lot of function, a lot of utility. You can see the flower on it looks like a miniature version of the southern magnolia. Again, and that will also have a nice fragrance to it. Sometimes you'll see this listed as semi-evergreen, but the reality is for an art environment, most of the year it will shed 90% of the leaves, if not 100% of the leaves. But if we have a very mild winter, it may retain some of them. So again, this is just another really nice tree that gives us ornamental value, ecological value, and well suited to our more moderate size or smaller landscapes. And that's going to flower for us, I'm going to say kind of a May, June time period. It hasn't blossomed yet. And let's look at my next candidate on here. The red cedar. I get embarrassed sometimes, where I go around and there's a time when I probably even would have said, oh, that's a junk tree. They grow in highway margins, abandoned fields. They'll grow pretty much any place you let them grow. Tough, durable, withstands almost any kind of extreme. Probably do best out in the open sun, but sometimes they can acclimate and adapt even to a part shade type environment. This, from an ecological perspective, this is again a wonderful nesting habitat for birds, because when they are seeking shelter and they want to be hidden from the predators, they can work their way into the inner branches there, helps shelter them from the wind and as well. And of course, then it also produces the juniper berries, which is a good food source for them. So this plant has just so much to offer us. And so often we are looking to create these screens, these evergreen kind of boundaries between properties to block a view or something. So this is something that's really durable, hardy. again, that Virginia native there and can be functional in our landscape as far as providing the screening of the view. Now, the trade has responded somewhat by taking the red cedars that you might see growing around the woodlands and stuff, but we'll cultivate them. We'll select ones that might be a little tighter, a little denser in shape, maybe have a little more of this kind of blue coloration. Because that's one thing is, you know, sometimes they'll sort of brown out or go rust colored for you in the winter. Again, to me, that's beautiful, but some people are a little bit objectionable to that. So some of our cultivars that we offer for sale might have a little better color retention, but in other words, you know, have all the same qualities as native ones that are out there. So those are my 3 trees to kick things off. And Sally, I'll just give anybody an opportunity to see if they have any thoughts or questions before we move on to the shrubs.
Definitely. Yeah, we have a few questions coming in related to the trees. So the first question is, actually we have 2 questions about what's available at Merrifield. So the first is, are the trees you just discussed available at Merrifield? And the second is, do we have a separate section for natives, for people who want to come browse the natives?
So to the best of my knowledge, all 3 of those trees, I know they're available here at Fair Oaks, and they should be available at the other locations, but you can always call to double check. These are trees that we've been selling for decades and decades, and it's just they're kind of growing in popularity. Are they in their own section? I don't have a complete answer on that. Most of these are divided more into, like we have our flowering trees in sort of one area, our evergreen trees in a different area. So they're really more organized within how we use them in the landscape. Here at the Fair Oaks store, we do have a small area where we sort of feature specific native plants. Getting a little bit ahead of myself, but like these couple of shrubs behind me, like this native azalea that happens to be in bloom. So I brought that, for example, because it's more seasonal, you would find in the native section. But yes, we've got a big selection of native plants. Most of them are put sort of by their function or use. Is it a tree? Is it a shrub? Is it a perennial? And not specifically out there. Having said that, I'm going to just, again, I'm kind of going a little out of order to answer your questions. We do work in collaboration with Nova Natives. Yeah. This is a local group that is promoting the plants of locally native, Northern Virginia native plants. And what they will do, one of the things, a wonderful organization, they do so much, and I'll share more with you on that. But one of the things that they do to help you and me out is they will go around, they have volunteers that go around and put little stickers or tags that help to identify some of the specific native plants. It's not 100% reliable because, hey, we just got something in, they haven't had time to tag it, those kind of stuff, but we're making a real effort to identify which ones are native to Virginia and which ones are native to Northern Virginia.
Thanks, David. Yeah, and we had another question coming in from someone who's in Maryland asking if these trees are native to Maryland as well.
So I think that's an excellent question. It's one of the things that I did want to talk about. When we say native, are we talking about native to North America, which again, we've got a huge diverse country, different climates, different geographies. So it's probably better that we look at more regional. So we might be talking about, is it maybe native to the southeastern US? Is it native to Virginia or Maryland? What we have in Virginia is, again, this wonderful organization, Plant Nova Natives. They've actually divided the state up into 8 different regions. So you can really drill down to specifically what is native to your county. I'm not that rigid. Everybody's here. Now, I'm not a natives only guy. You know that. You've seen my garden. I give a nod to natives, and that's a real plus in my selection of plants. But I take more license. And so I have plants like, if I say like the Fottigilla or oak leaf hydrangeas, and they may be native to southeastern US, maybe not Virginia, I'll use it. Anyway, I'm indirectly answering your question. Bottom line is I'm not as familiar with what Maryland offers. Generally speaking, the things that are native to Fairfax County, that would extend up into Maryland. But just like you say Maryland, well, are you in a coastal area along the beach? Are you kind of more in the Piedmont or in the mountain range. So again, we try to match as close as possible to your region. But, state boundaries are man-made. Nature doesn't really follow those at all.
Thanks, David. All right, next question is about the red cedar. Does the red cedar take full sun?
That's where it thrives. That's where it does really best. That's why you see them growing in abandoned fields and, along the roadside and that kind of thing, because it's what they talk about pioneer species. If there's a piece of fallow land, they come in, they establish quick, they grow quick, they're heat and drought tolerant. They can kind of come in and occupy that land real quickly.
And about how tall does it get?
They'll probably, now I'm thinking, my favorite picture I have of a tree is this old cedar that's out in the Manassas battlefield. And I should have put it in here. So the size they get's all relative with time. That's what I mean, think about. What I'll call a landscape size. We're talking about, 15 feet tall and maybe, 10 feet wide type thing. That's probably over the next 10, 20 years, but these trees can live for hundreds of years. And at that point, they could be double that size.
Thanks, David. All right. We've still got about 10 questions. So do you want to keep going or do you want to take some more questions?
You know what? I'm getting myself sidetracked. Let's show pictures of my shrubs and then we'll take a few more questions.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. And this is great. I just like it, just do this to stimulate the conversation. So this is Itea virginica, the Virginia sweet spire, which is in the fall color. I'm talking about that little shrub with the red foliage that's down in the front or right just above the wall. Now, this was just kind of a neat plant combination because the Itea is a Virginia native, as well as the native dogwood behind it. And of course, you can see the naturalized woodline there. So here we've used native plants, a very attractive, colorful landscape combination that's there. Itea, this shrub, it will probably flower for us again, kind of like May, June time period. It gets these tassels of white flowers on it that again can have a light fragrance to it. Size, you'll see they'll get, maybe 4 to 6 feet tall and wide at most, but they also respond well to pruning. So this is a shrub that really lends itself to managed landscapes, and it's got flowers. And then to me, the highlight, the real beauty of this plant comes out in the fall of the year, which again, personally, my favorite time of the year. So I have a little bias on there. But again, a shrub that will give us this kind of year-round attention or year-round interest with flowers, fall coloration. It's durable. Again, this will naturally grow in kind of moist environments or stream valleys, but where we have poorly drained soils, it's a real one to consider looking at. And we've got a couple named varieties that differ a little bit in their size and coloration. But that's Itea virginica, the Virginia sweet spire. And let's see who's coming up next. Smooth hydrangea, right there in the center. This is our native hydrangea. It's probably one of the most reliable. Some of the hydrangeas, the Hydrangea macrophyllus, that have the pink or blue blossoms on it, that can be damaged by frost, and we got special pruning requirements and stuff, but they're gorgeous. Hey, I have them in my garden. This is an alternative. Pretty much we're talking about the white blossoms. There are some new varieties that have come in the last few years that also now we can add pink to our color palette. But this is an example of a hydrangea that blossoms off of new growth. So this one, you could prune it in the wintertime while it's dormant. And then as the new growth emerges out of there this spring, it will set flower buds and produce later this summer off of that same growth. So that's one of the reasons we like this plant, because it's reliable, it's durable. Again, like other hydrangeas, it does better in light shade, reasonably moist conditions. But this is one that's not fussy. It's a reliable bloomer. And like I said, we can go either kind of a white or pink coloration there. In the background there is the bottle brush buckeye, which is also kind of a native plant, which then you see incorporated with things like the hosta and others. So this is, I think, a good example where we can use just good plants, just good plant combinations. They're pretty, that are attractive. And we're also trying to do a little bit to help support the neighbor, the ecosystem around us. And we'll take another look here. Buttonbush, this we don't see used very much, but this is one of the things I'm going to say I love about the plant native kind of movement. Buttonbush, we grow it because it gets that really cool blossom there. It looks like a little Sputnik, kind of a satellite almost type of deal in there. This is kind of a plant that would grow on the margins of a lake or a pond, kind of swampy environment. It's a little bit of an open, I'm going to use the word kind of scraggly. That may not be the right word, but it doesn't have a lot of form to it. It doesn't have a whole lot of interest to it until it comes into flower. But it's worth having because these flowers are just so incredible. They do, again, they have a slight fragrance. Pollinators will go crazy for them. It's a fantastic plant for supporting pollinators. And then, of course, all the insects that the birds and the other animals have to feed and live off of, and it will grow in harsh environments. It takes a little bit of space up. So what the industry has done is we have now started to introduce some varieties of this that are a little denser and more compact. So I keep using this word variety cultivar. This is where we take a native plant like this buttonbush. We say, hey, this is a great plant, but it's kind of big and sprawly. It doesn't lend itself real well to suburban landscapes. But if we can select one that stays smaller and more compact, so it's more accessible to the public, and then that's what we tend to introduce and sell. So I think we sell one, I'm probably going to ruin this name, I think it's called Sugar Shack. That's a smaller, denser version. The same plant, the same species, but just a smaller, more compact form of it. And that's our buttonbush. I think that's the end of my little shrub thing. How about we take a few more questions?
Definitely, yeah. All right, so we'll start with some more shrub questions now. Just a reminder to everybody, if you don't have time to get your questions answered, if we don't get to it, please feel free to follow up with us if you're on Facebook by message, if you are, or through our service email account on the contact us page on our website, or if you're on Zoom, you can just hit reply to your sign up confirmation email. All right, David, so we've had a few people are asking questions about which of these shrubs are deer resistant. So do the deer like to snack on the hydrangeas or the buttonbush?
We definitely go after the hydrangea. That there's no doubt about. I would have to check on the others. I think we're okay on the others, but hydrangeas they will devour.
So the buttonbush and the sweet spire, maybe the hydrangeas, they definitely like. That's great. Okay, yeah, that answers a lot of people's questions. If someone has a wetland or a boggy area, do you recommend any particular native shrubs for them?
Well, a lot of these that I've suggested here today, because look, we have clay, poorly drained soils, have our native conditions here. So things like that buttonbush, we talked about the sweet bay magnolia. This one that's right over my shoulder, this is flowered here. This is aronia, or it's called a chokecherry or chokeberry. Beautiful, you see it in bloom there, has these beautiful berries on in fall. Nice, brilliant red fall coloration. Is definitely kind of a swamp dweller, for poorly drained locations. So it's not my slide set, but we talked about some of the inkberry hollies. There's a lot of these plants, because again, we live in a wet, kind of damp environment. So a lot of these plants are well conditioned to those situations.
Thanks, David. And would you recommend, we have someone asking about the coastal plains area of Virginia. Would you recommend the same types of plants for that? And I have to apologize, my geography may be a little off. I'm not sure if that's a different area of Virginia than, I think maybe than where we are, which is maybe more the Piedmont sort of. But
well, we always say, how gardening is very local. And I would prefer, if you're in a coastal area, that you speak with somebody that's kind of lives in that area, is more familiar with it. Again, I'm going to put a little plug in here now for the Plant Nova Natives group. Like I mentioned, they have a series of 8 of these handbooks. The state, they divided up into different regions. So I'm pretty sure they would have one of these that's available for the coastal region. This particular one is because we're Northern Virginia. So their website is plantnovanatives.org. And everything that's in this book, which again, they've identified plants that are good for landscapes. They put it annuals, perennials. They talk about plants for poorly drained locations. They've got photographs. This entire book is available for free on their website if you just want to download a PDF version of it yourself or just use the online version of it. This book itself, if you wanted a printed copy, they sell it for a small fee. So I would go to that website, plantnovanatives.com, look within that to see, because I don't know who the coastal plain version would be, but there is a group in your region that would have these same resources available for you.
Excellent. Thanks, David. We have a couple more questions about the hydrangeas. Someone wanted to know if, I'm sorry, everybody, that's my dog, if you can hear her. For the hydrangea, how do you know if it's getting too much sun? Someone said their hydrangea leaves are turning brown and curling. Do they prefer parched shade? Does that necessarily mean it's getting too much sunlight?
Most of the turning brown and curling right now is because of the cold weather. We had 70 degrees. This was just like a replay of last year. You guys might remember last year we were running around t-shirt and shorts in March, and then the cold weather came in April and May. So that happened to us. It was 70 degrees and sunny and beautiful in March. Hydrangeas and plants started coming out. You might even remember the cherry blossoms bloomed a week before the parade. So we're like, hey, the plants are moving, it's spring is here. And then we had 28, 27, and 29 degree temperatures for 3 days. And that basically singed the foliage that's on the hydrangeas. So that's what everybody's looking at right now. And the bad news is that could have killed the flower buds that were emerging at the same time. So again, I'm gonna pat myself on the back. Good job, David. I went out last night, for example, and put a little blanket over my hydrangea to protect that and prevent it from happening. So your plants are going to be fine. It's not really associated with the sun. I can bet you, almost guarantee you, they just got a little bit damaged with the cold.
Thank you. And that actually leads to another question. People are asking if they need to cover their hydrangeas tonight.
I'm doing it, it's up like, I woke up at my house this morning, it was 33 degrees. I mean, that's this is a garden, right? You roll out of bed and you check your phone to see what the cold, low temperature is. And then you're like, yeah, glad I covered my hydrangea. That's a nice way to start the day. So I think again, check your local forecast, but if you're going down into the low 30s, that's where I'd rather be safe than sorry and put a protective cover over them.
Thanks. And we have one more question about hydrangea. We have a couple people asking, so if someone goes to their nursery, their local nursery, and asks for the smooth hydrangea, will they be familiar with that name, or is there a botanical name that they need to ask for?
Botanical name is Hydrangea arborescens. The sort of the cultivar names, the one that most people know, has been around for a long time, because again, so Hydrangea arborescens, when you see it growing out in the forest, you get a little kind of flower about this big. Nothing wrong with that, it's pretty. But suddenly, I think it was out in Illinois, there couples out horseback riding, she goes like, wow, look at that. And she sees one that's got flowers this big. And so that one got introduced into the trade decades ago under the name of Annabelle.
Yeah.
So you might see it sold under the name of Annabelle as the white one.
Yeah.
And I think there's some pink ones are being introduced with name. I think it's like Invincibelle, or I lose track of the names. But the species is Hydrangea arborescens. And then what I call different flavors, different varieties might be like Annabelle or Invincibelle or those kind of names.
Thanks, David. All right, so we have one more question. Well, we have more questions, but one person asked if there's anything that would grow well on a slope, like native shrubs that would grow well in sloping areas.
Oh, there are. I'm trying to think a little bit about that. One thing, again, like that, even that Itea, it kind of suckers and spreads. One of the best, I didn't bring it in here. And again, I was so glad to see this when I go down to our store, Mosaic District, and some of those strips in the middle of the highway, they've landscaped with roofs, Rus aromatica. I'm trying to remember the common name. I think called fragrant sumac. It's now it's a shrub. It's kind of low and shrubby, but stays low because again, like in their median strip, you know, they want to stay down like 2 feet or so, so we don't obstruct view. But it kind of suckers and spreads out like this, you know, so it can actually stabilize and hold hillsides. It looks like poison ivy. That's a little game you play because it looks like poison ivy, the 3 leaflets, but it's actually called Rus aromatica. You crush the leaf and it actually has a nice aroma, and it's a great plant for stabilizing hillsides. Brilliant red fall color. But that's just off the top of my head. If we thought about it, I'm sure we could come up with some others.
Thanks, David. All right, we have more questions coming in, so I don't know if you want to go ahead and hit your last.
Let's go these 3
section.
pictures. So just to Sal and I talked about this. We thought we just kind of mix it up a little bit, keep things interesting. So let's look at some perennials. The dwarf crested iris right there. It should be flowering soon. Again, this is my front yard. I planted a 4-inch pot, guys. I'm not making a little 4-inch pot. I put it in there. It took about 3 years later. I had this dense cover that's in there. This again is kind of a little bit of a spring ephemeral in that, you know, it comes up there. It flowers for us like this sort of in April. It pretty much fades away, you know, as we move into June. It kind of goes into more of a summer dormancy. But to provide a little bit of that ground cover kind of structure, because it's spreading by a rhizome, beautiful miniature form of the iris. It's just a real greeting in spring. And then let's go on. Again, this is just, you know, if you can still see a little bit of that iris in the background, but this is Chrysogonum virginium, the Virginiana, or no, Virginica, I lose track of that. But green and gold, again, they are beginning to flower now or will be soon. I found this to be a pretty sturdy ground cover kind of plant. Gives us that nice bloom through spring, fairly long time. You might get about 4 weeks of color out of it. But then the foliage, it has this nice bright green foliage. It creeps and spreads on the ground like you see there, and they'll go a little bit bronzy for us in fall. So these are mostly sort of shade plants, you know, where at least partial shade conditions. So this is, again, it's growing under Acusa dogwood, which is an Asian species again, and you can see the hosta in there. So some people just personal preference, if you want to go all native, that's a fantastic thing, but I mix and match just based on what I like. And also I am certainly acknowledging it has a role in the environment, supporting beneficial insects and wildlife. So that's another of our perennials. And I think I've got maybe one more in there. Oh yeah, the Joe Pye weed. I tell you, if you try and create a butterfly garden, this is just kind of like a must-have. It's a late summer bloomer. Probably we're talking about August, September time period. But this thing just draws the pollinators in forever. It's a pretty big plant. You know, they can grow easily 6-7 feet tall. Again, in our nursery, sometimes we try to sell some little more compact varieties. This is an example out in Meadowlark Gardens. And I think maybe I put a close-up in there. See if I can have one more. I can't remember if I put that in there or not. Yeah, and this is down at the Hahn Horticulture Gardens down at Virginia Tech, where I put that in because you can see a little bit of that Joe Pye eutrochium in that front, and then right behind it, Clethra, another Virginia native, and then you see behind it bananas. So they definitely are mixing and matching there. All right, those are my pictures. Let's go back to some questions.
All right, David, we have more questions coming in. Do you recommend any small native perennials for shaded areas?
Oh, there's somebody like right now. See, I didn't bring them in for show and tell because a lot of what you see right now are what I call these spring ephemerals. You know, trilliums in bloom, but there's, you know, hepatica. There's so many things, you know, the bluebells, Virginia bluebells are just finishing up. But a lot of the early spring flowering stuff, it just, like I said, comes in, it captures the sunlight, and it's great for the early season pollinators. And they're beautiful to enjoy, but they kind of fizzle out as we go into summer. They go into a summer dormancy. I did bring, like here, I've got Tiarella, which is one of my favorites because I was trying to bring things that have flowers on. Tiarella, again, it is a Northern Virginia native. You can see this is flowering a little bit early because it's in the nursery, But this is a great spreads almost into ground cover kind of form. And I've got this planted in my garden now. It's doing really great, except I have the rabbits are chewing on it. And I figure, well, hey, the rabbits got to eat too. So that might be one that you look for, kind of a low border. And there, again, we've got all different varieties on that. I'm going to say, I mean, sedum, probably a little more of a sun plant. But again, the chrysogonum we showed you. A lot of our native plants bloom later in the summer. So things like coreopsis and so on, I didn't include them in here just because, that's down the road. It's equally important because we want pollinators. We really want stuff that's going to flower for us all summer long.
Thanks, David. Someone's asking a question about their Joe Pye weed. Two people, actually. One says they planted their Joe Pye weed in the garden in part shade and it would fall over instead of staying up. Is that due to the shade? And then another person's having trouble getting their Joe Pye weed established, getting it established.
What I do with some plants to get really tall and leggy, like that Joe Pye, you can prune them in sort of a late May, early June time period to make the plant stunt its growth in a sense and keep it shorter and bushier. I hate staking plants, so I'm not really into supporting, but what I'll do is just, like I said, go in and kind of a late spring, mid-late spring, prune them, and then that keeps the plant shorter and stockier. So we'll do that with Joe Pye. You can do it with summer phlox. I even do that with some sedum varieties. I even do it with Amsonia. So plants get big and floppy. That's what I do. Problems getting Joe Pye established. Wow, because it's named Joe Pye weed. Once that gets going, it travels by rhizome and it fills the area pretty good. Joe Pye will grow in shade, but I think it does better where it gets a little bit of sunlight. It's not fussy about drainage. So just, mix a little compost in the soil and plant it, and usually away it goes. Yeah, but we could talk. We stop by the store and see if there's something specific, that we can talk about in your environment.
Thanks, David. Can you mention if there are any native viburnums that are good? We have a few people asking about viburnums.
My favorite one, and I was talking to one of our designers out here, Meryl. She just found it's in bloom everywhere right now. It's Viburnum prunifolium, or sometimes called a black hall viburnum. What I like about this is that it can serve almost like a dogwood does as a small tree. It's sort of this large shrub, small tree kind of thing. It gets its name Viburnum prunifolium because the leaf looks just like a plum. But I keep thinking that plant with a little bit of training could make a perfect small specimen tree. Again, I think of this because I live in a townhouse, so I'm always looking at things to stay small like that. So I love Viburnum prunifolium. We also have the blue muffin, or it's a type of this arrowwood viburnum, which is a native. So there's some great viburnums out there. Again, I just try to limit what I bring in here because we could go on this all afternoon.
Definitely. Do you have any suggestions for a native ground cover that grows relatively quickly?
One, like I said, that I'm having a lot of success with, because I trial and error kind of stuff, the chrysogonum, the green and gold started out really well, but then I had some problems in my garden. So then I've now gone and I put this tiarella in, which seems to be holding up quite well. That spreads out. There are some native geraniums. I just didn't have them to bring in to show for you. But I think geranium macrorhizum is a native, and it spreads and makes a nice ground cover also. There are some native sedums for sunny environments. So there's absolutely some really good choices out there. Right now, might change my mind tomorrow, but right now I'm going to say, look at tiarella, or it's called foam flower is the common name.
Thanks, David. We had a customer write in and ask if you have a list of your favorites that you'd be willing to share.
Well, that list can change daily on a whim.
All right, let's see.
It's all great, it's just the hard part is deciding which ones.
Yes, yeah, we were talking about that with Louis Ratchford on Tuesday. He always jokes that every plant is his favorite plant, so that just made me laugh. All right, do you have any design recommendations for shady areas?
So what I want to do is, most of the plants I've talked about here today are for shade environments, because again,
Yeah.
that's you know the kind of conditions I live in. What I want to do, because we're going to run out of time real quick. We can't do this topic in such a short period. I've said this over and over, but I want to mention again, Plant Nova Natives. Just go to their website, www.plantnovanatives.org. You will find everything, every question you've asked. You're going to find your answers right here on their website. I'm not trying to sell their book for them. I'm just saying because this is available free on their website. Great source of information. The other thing that I want to show you that I use, this is the Flora of Virginia. This is the catalog of all the plants that grow, you know, uncultivated plants growing in Virginia. It's a big technical reference, no color pictures, not at all technical language stuff, but it's really an authority when you want to know what grows where. The real thing I want to show you is don't go buy this book, but there's an app that's on your phone. Costs about 20 bucks, but I can't remember all this stuff. What I do when I'm walking around the nursery, this app lives on my phone. It's not the Flora of Virginia, probably the best 20 bucks I spent. I can look up the native plants here. It gives me the information about them, where they grow. There's an atlas so I can see specifically which counties they grow in, as well as a description. So you can get this. Again, I'm not, this is all nonprofit groups I'm supporting. This is not, hey, buy this.
Flora of Virginia.
Flora of Virginia, Flora, Flora of Virginia. You'll find on the App Store for like 20 bucks. Again, they're technical references, but this is a lot easier than this to carry around with you. So I think that's about all time we're going to have for questions, because you know I have my little video that I wanted to play. This is kind of a fun, goofy thing we did about a week ago.
Oh, hi everybody. I'm just out here enjoying a little quiet time, a little meditation on a beautiful spring day surrounded by these beautiful carpet of wildflowers. So I thought we'd take just a minute here to play wildflower or weed. So just this little spot where I'm standing here, this beautifully diverse collection of plants. First thing I spot is just the common chickweed. This was actually brought to this country by European settlers as a culinary herb. It was actually used as a salad green, but that's when it's before it's flowering, when it's a more tender state. This is an example of a winter annual. So now in early spring, it's flowering. It will go to seed, and then that plant dies for the summer. So this grows during the cool temperatures. And then in front of me, I have this carpet of this beautiful purple flower. I have customers bring this to me at the clinic all the time for identification because they want to add it as a ground cover in their garden. It's called ground ivy, or sometimes creeping Charlie. It's a member of the mint family, and it's a perennial. So each year it creeps and spreads and spreads and spreads. So it does get this beautiful purple flower on here in the spring, but then it lives year round. Of course, the problem is in a garden setting, it gets pretty aggressive and tends to outcompete the other plants around it. It was again introduced by the Europeans and brought here for both culinary and medicinal purposes. Right in this same collection, of course, dandelions, which everybody knows, was brought here as a culinary herb, is also a perennial. And these plants now, they've escaped into the environment, and sometimes people consider them weeds because they do spread about and they do become quite aggressive that's in there. And I look around, and off to my side I see dead nettle. Dead nettle, also a member of the mint family, but it's a winter annual. And again, it was brought here as a medicinal and culinary plant, but for many of you, because it reseeds itself and starts growing in places we don't exactly want it to grow, we'll consider it a weed. So again, that is today's edition of Wildflower or Weed, you decide.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate you sharing this class today. And I know we get a lot of questions sometimes about from people who either think that those are weeds or want more of them in their yard. So that's always good to show that. Everybody, just a quick reminder, if you weren't able to get your questions answered today, we would be happy to follow up with you. If you're on our Facebook page, you can send us a message. You can also go to the contact us page on our website and send us an email that goes to one of my colleagues who can help send you in the right direction. Or if you are on our Zoom class, you can just hit reply to your confirmation email and those emails will come to me. So please feel free to follow up and send us your questions. David, once again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Okay. Happy Earth Day, everybody.
Thank you all. Happy Earth Day. Have a good afternoon.